Hi, I'm Alara, and my family didn't just sell my father's old car, they sold the only thing keeping him alive. They smiled about it, over turkey and cranberry sauce. My brother called it just a car. They didn't know it was federal evidence. They didn't know I'd spent years holding back the truth, until the FBI kicked down the door. Now, they know. But the price of silence? That's something they never saw coming. The drive up to Flagstaff felt longer than usual. Maybe it was the late autumn light, already turning the sky to bronze. Or maybe it was the quiet inside the car, a kind of silence that didn't ask for music. I kept both hands steady on the wheel, eyes tracing the familiar curves of the road I'd driven 100 times before. The pine trees stood like sentries, unchanged, watching me pass like they knew something I didn't. I had told myself I was coming here just to keep the peace. That's what I said out loud when I packed the pecan pie and put on the same maroon sweater from last year. But the truth was, peace had been gone for a long time. I was just another ghost haunting the old family house. And today, like every Thanksgiving, I was expected to wear a smile. The Vaughn house hadn't changed. Still the wraparound porch with sagging steps. Still the faded wreath Marla insisted on hanging every year, even though the colors had long since bled out. I parked on the street, no room in the driveway, not for me anyway. I grabbed the pie and headed toward the door, the sound of laughter leaking through the windows like a radio, tuned just low enough to remind you you're not part of the joke. The moment I stepped inside, the warmth hit me. Heat from the oven, the golden glow of hanging lights, voices overlapping in that casual chaos only family can create. No one looked up. I stood there in the doorway, holding that pie like a peace offering nobody asked for. Derek was already pouring wine, playing host. Marla hovered near the turkey, like it might run away if she turned her back. "Look who finally showed," Shelby called out from across the room, smirking. "We weren't sure if you'd make it this year." Laughter followed, not cruel, but not kind either. It didn't matter. I smiled, polite, empty. I looked toward the table. No seat. There was one at the very end, but it had already been taken by Derek's youngest, who was elbow deep in mashed potatoes. Every other place had a plate, a napkin, a name card. None had mine. No one noticed as I walked into the corner and pulled out the old wooden chair with one leg shorter than the rest. The one we used to shove behind the door. The one even the dog didn't like. I slid it in quietly beside the table, its legs scraping against the floor like it wanted everyone to look. No one did. In this house, every chair meant something. Derek's seat at the head, earned by default, not merit. Marla's spot, near the kitchen, command central. Even Shelby's kids had assigned places. Mine was borrowed, crooked, unwanted. I placed the pie on the counter without ceremony. No one asked what kind it was. Dinner started, plates passed, wine poured, stories recycled for the 100th time. I nodded, smiled, ate in small bites, kept quiet. Then Derek, ever the showman, raised his glass with a grin. "Oh, by the way," he said, like it was a passing thought, "your old car in the garage, we sold it." My hand stopped midair. He chuckled. "Family needed to cover a few things. It's been sitting there forever, right? Figured it was time." Shelby clinked her glass to his. "That's leadership." Someone muttered, "About time?" and Marla nodded like he'd just won an award. I blinked. "Oh," I said. "That's fine." I took a sip of wine. It burned a little on the way down. Inside, something cracked. Not loud, more like a whisper deep in my ribs. I reached into my pocket, fingertips brushing the keychain still clipped to my house keys. My father's initials, worn smooth from years of holding. It was the last thing he ever gave me before he died. They didn't sell a car. They sold the last part of him I had left. Laughter swelled again around the table, Derek making some joke about interest rates and cutting losses. I couldn't hear it all. The sound dulled, like someone had pressed their palm to my ears. I folded my napkins slowly, each crease too sharp. Nobody noticed my hands shaking. Maybe this is how it happens, I thought. Not with some big betrayal, but one favor at a time. They chip away at you, a chair, a car, a memory, until there's nothing left to claim as yours. I looked around. None of them remembered the summer he taught me how to change the oil in that car. None of them sat with him on the side of the road in Flagstaff when it broke down. They didn't even ask. And I just let it go. Again. As I glanced toward the hallway, I caught a flicker of movement. My father's old friend, Mr. Calhoun, who shouldn't even be here, who hadn't come to these dinners in years, was staring right at me. His lips moved, mouthing something. I leaned in, but couldn't hear. Then I saw it, just beyond the window. A faint reflection at first. Blue lights, flashing, faint, distant. At first I thought it was just reflection, until I heard the knock. It wasn't just a knock, it was a pounding. The kind that makes everyone freeze mid-sentence, mid-bite, as if some primal instinct warns, this isn't good. The laughter died like someone had unplugged the room. Derek's hand hovered in midair, holding a half-poured glass of wine. Marla furrowed her brow, glanced toward the window. Who in the world? On Thanksgiving night? The knock came again, 3 times, hard, measured. I didn't move. I couldn't. The pies still sat untouched on the counter. The old chair beneath me felt suddenly colder, as if it too had sensed something shifting. Derek stood. His face tightened, but he played it off with a shrug. Probably a neighbor. Forgot we're the only ones who still keep a landline. He walked toward the front door, fixing his smile halfway there. That same fake polished thing he used during church potlucks and HOA meetings. I caught Shelby's eye, just for a second. Her fork hovered above a scoop of sweet potatoes, frozen in the air like she didn't quite trust her hand to move yet. Even the kids had gone silent, no small feat. Then the door opened. The porch light spilled in across the hardwood. 2 men stepped forward, suits, coats. No badges flashing, but the posture was enough. One tall, with thinning hair, and the kind of stillness that made you nervous. The other younger, notebook already in hand. "Evening," the older one said. "Sorry to interrupt your holiday. We're with the Bureau." Derek blinked. "The Bureau?" "FBI," the younger man clarified, flipping open his notebook. "We're looking into a vehicle connected to a federal protection case, a 1969 Mustang GT. It was reportedly sold from this property in the past 10 days. You could hear the clock in the hallway ticking. Derek let out a short, uncomfortable laugh. "The Mustang? That old thing? We sold it last week. Junk, really." The older agent tilted his head slightly. "Do you happen to know who approved the sale?" Derek looked caught off guard for half a second. Just half. Then he smiled again, tighter this time. "It was just sitting there, been in the garage for years. We thought, well, it could help with some bills. It was a family decision." Marla, from her seat, chimed in. "Yes, of course. It was all agreed on. That car's been dead weight for a decade." The younger agent scribbled something, looked up. "Ma'am, that vehicle was under federal custody. It wasn't just a car, it was part of an active protection file." I felt the air leave the room. I wasn't surprised, not really. I stared at Derek, not at his mouth, not at his words, at his eyes, the way they slid past mine, the way his jaw tensed. He knew. I stood slowly. "You checked the glove box before you sold it," I said. Not a question, a statement. Derek didn't respond. His eyes stayed on the agent's. I took a step closer, My voice was quiet, but didn't waver. "You found the papers, Dad. Kept there, didn't you?" His throat moved, a hard swallow. Still no words. Marla looked from him to me, back again. "Derek, what's she talking about?" The agents waited, watching. "Did you know what that car really was?" I asked. Finally he spoke. "I thought it was just paperwork, some old junk he forgot to get rid of." "You thought?" My voice was sharp now, no longer soft. "You sold something tied to witness protection, and your best guess was old junk." The older agent stepped in. "We'll need to ask you a few questions, Mr. Vaughn. Would you mind coming with us downtown?" Derek hesitated. Shelby stood, then sat back down, unsure which side of this mess she belonged to. Marla covered her mouth. "This can't be happening." But it was. Derek didn't argue, didn't shout, just nodded once and followed them out like a man who knew the jig was up long before the music stopped. They walked past the table, past the half-eaten turkey, the untouched pie. One of the agents bumped into the crooked chair, the one I had dragged out of the corner earlier. It scraped loudly against the wood floor, then sat askew, pushed out of place like me. No one said a word. The door shut behind them. The silence that followed was heavier than the knock. In the corner, the old clock ticked again. One sound, two meanings: betrayal and consequence. I looked around at the people I once called family. Marla still had her napkin clenched in both hands. Shelby wouldn't meet my gaze. One of the kids whispered, "What's witness protection?" I sat down, gently, in the chair the agent had nudged. "They'll say it was an accident," I thought. "A mix-up. They'll say Derek didn't know, but you don't accidentally hide paperwork in a glove box and call it nothing." The chair creaked beneath me. I glanced toward the window. The blue lights had faded into the night. Only a hush remained. Then, just as the quiet seemed to settle, the older agent stepped back in. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look around. He just walked to where I sat and said, "Miss Finch, we'll need to talk, privately." And with that, the room held its breath again. He didn't ask me to come to the station. He asked if I knew why that car was under protection. That sentence looped in my head all night, bouncing against the silence of my apartment, refusing to let me rest. I hadn't even changed out of my clothes. I just laid there on the couch, staring at the ceiling, the sound of the fridge humming like it was trying to comfort me. My eyes were dry, not from lack of tears, but from being too tired to form any. By the time the first hint of sun slipped through the blinds, I couldn't take it anymore. I slipped on a sweater, grabbed my keys, and left the apartment. The early morning air in Flagstaff had a sharpness to it, almost accusatory. Everything felt too awake, too clear. The world had no idea what just cracked open inside me. The drive home from my mom's the night before had been quiet. My hands stiff on the steering wheel, the old keychain from Dad's car cold in my palm. I didn't know why I brought it with me, only that it felt like an anchor. Now, sitting at my tiny kitchen table, I placed it down in front of me and just stared. That keychain had hung from the ignition of the Mustang since I was 16. A little metal tag that read, "Built with love, not shortcuts." He used to say that when we worked on engines together. I used to think he meant the carburetor. Maybe he didn't. The phone rang around 7:15 a.m. I nearly didn't answer, but something told me I had to. "Elara Finch?" The voice was low, calm. "Yes." "This is Special Agent Harrow. I wanted to follow up." I didn't respond. "The car your brother sold, it was connected to a sealed federal case. One involving your father." I closed my eyes. "My father was a mechanic," I said, but it came out shaky. "He fixed engines," Harrow agreed, his tone even. "But maybe he fixed something else too, something bigger, and someone didn't want it fixed." The line went silent after that, But I didn't hang up. I sat there for a few more seconds, holding the phone long after he'd ended the call. It was then I remembered something. Nights when Dad would be out in the garage late, long after dinner, talking low, almost whispering. I'd assumed it was about a customer's busted transmission or some part he was ordering. But one night I walked in and heard him say, "If I don't do this right, people get hurt." At the time, I thought he meant the car. Now, I wasn't so sure. I went to my closet, dragged out the old plastic storage bin I hadn't opened in years. It was dusty, cracked at the corners. I pulled out receipts, letters, expired coupons, a few baby pictures, a shoebox of old postcards from a road trip I barely remembered. Then, behind a framed photo of us at a gas station off Route 66, taped to the back of the frame was an envelope. It read, "For EF, if you ever need to remember who I was." My fingers hesitated before opening it. Inside were 3 things: a folded piece of paper, typed, and stamped with a federal seal, my father's name printed neatly, then crossed out with thick black ink. Below it, in red letters, John Mathers. A small handwritten note in the bottom corner read, "Don't trust what they say about me. Trust the car." There was a second page, filled with numbers and case codes I didn't understand, and a photocopy of an ID badge. Same face, different name. My father had a second life. I sat back, the envelope still open on my lap. The air in the room had shifted, like it was holding its own breath, waiting to see what I'd do next. For the first time in days, I didn't feel lost. I felt aligned, like something inside me had clicked into place. The car wasn't just sentimental, it was a message, and Derek had sold it like a piece of junk. I stood, walked to the desk drawer, and locked the file inside. I didn't have a plan, not yet. But I knew one thing: silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. Derek had borrowed the garage keys 6 months ago, said he wanted to reorganize the tools before winter. I didn't think much of it then. Now I couldn't stop thinking about it. Had he found this file first? Had he known? If he did, he lied to all of us. Again. I looked at myself in the hallway mirror, hair tied up in a loose bun, face pale from a sleepless night, but eyes sharper than they'd been in years. Dad wasn't hiding from danger, I whispered to my reflection. He was hiding us from it. I stood there a minute longer, until the silence stopped feeling heavy and started to feel useful. Then my phone buzzed. No ringtone, just a vibration across the counter. I picked it up, a text from an unknown number. "You weren't supposed to find that file." I didn't know who they were, only that they still had my family's number. The message vanished right before my eyes, like it had never been there. I blinked, half hoping it was some bizarre glitch. It wasn't. My thumb hesitated over the screen, then I snapped a screenshot. It felt small, almost silly. What could a screenshot really protect me from? But it gave me a thread to hold on to, a thread they hadn't cut yet. I set my phone down on the counter and stared at it. I didn't know if I should call someone or just sit with it. My apartment was quiet, too quiet. The hum of the heater kicked on, making the silence feel heavier, like it was pressing against my skin. I didn't sleep that night either. I stayed in my chair, wrapped in a blanket, mind spinning. I kept asking myself who would go that far to hide whatever was buried in my father's past. And why now? Why not 10 years ago? Why not when he died? By the time the sun broke over the rooftops, I was still at the table. The light came in soft, casting long shadows. I didn't feel rested, but I did feel ready. Sort of. The call came that night, right around 9:17 p.m. My phone buzzed once, twice, then rang. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something deep inside told me I needed to hear it. I answered, voice low. "Hello?" There was a crackle on the other end, then a voice, mechanical, warped. Walk away from the Mustang. You don't know what you're sitting on. I didn't speak. The voice continued, slower this time. Your father's name was never supposed to resurface. You open that file again and you'll regret it. Click, no goodbye, no name, just silence. I lowered the phone and sat still for a moment, staring at nothing. My heart was pounding, not from fear exactly, but from recognition. Someone was watching, someone who knew more than I did, and they weren't bluffing. Fear, I learned, isn't loud. It doesn't scream or break things. It whispers. It nudges. It pulls you back when you're inches from the edge of something that matters. But I was past the edge now. I wasn't climbing back. The next afternoon, I texted Candace and asked to meet for coffee. I chose a little diner off Route 66. Not fancy, just plain. The kind of place where you can sit in a booth and overhear a dozen stories while pretending your life isn't unraveling. She arrived 10 minutes late, dressed too neatly for someone who claimed to be overwhelmed. Her smile was tight, her energy nervous. She sat across from me and ordered decaf, no cream. We exchanged polite hellos. She didn't ask how I was. Instead, she leaned forward and said, "You should really let the FBI handle all this. Derek's already been through so much." I watched her carefully, not moving. "Funny," I said, stirring my coffee slowly. "I never told you the FBI was involved." Her hand paused halfway to her cup. A second too long. Her face didn't change, but her spoon clinked hard against the ceramic. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. She knew I'd caught it. Candace forced a small laugh. "Oh, come on. It's obvious, isn't it? I mean, they came to Thanksgiving." "They never said who they were," I replied softly. "Not until they were already in the living room." She blinked, then looked away. Out the window, anywhere but at me. That was enough. I left a tip on the table, slid out of the booth, and stood. "Tell Derek I'll see him soon," I said, almost gently. She didn't respond. Driving home, I took the long way. I wasn't ready to be back in that apartment just yet. I passed the used car lot where the Mustang had been sold. It looked different now. A yellow tape stretched across the gate, barely fluttering in the breeze. A man stood just outside the fence, hands in his coat pockets, watching the street. Watching me, no badge, no expression, just presence. I didn't stop, just slowed enough to remember his face. By the time I got home, dusk had settled in. The hallway light flickered as I turned the key in the lock. Something felt off. I couldn't name it, just wrong. I stepped inside, looked around, nothing broken, nothing out of place. But the drawer where I'd hidden the file? I opened it slowly. Everything was there, almost. One page was missing, just one. I didn't scream. I didn't panic. I sat down at my desk, pulled my laptop closer, and turned it on. If they wanted me quiet, they picked the wrong woman. I opened the rest of the file, read every line, every name, every date. I typed them out, word for word. I didn't know what I was building, but it was something. A map, a trail, a record. My fingers trembled, but I didn't stop. They had taken a page. I was going to write 10 more. The room was dim now. Only the light from the screen lit my face. I paused for a second, eyes burning, then heard the buzz. A new message. My hands moved before my thoughts caught up. I opened it. It was a photo of me, sitting in the diner with Candace, taken from outside the window. No words this time, just a caption, "You're next." They thought the photo would scare me. Instead, it gave me a timeline. I printed it, pinned it beside the scrap of note from the missing file page, and stared at the wall like it was a puzzle waiting for me to see what had always been there. I started drawing lines, connecting names I remembered from the file, dates I scribbled in a notebook, voices I could still hear in my memory. The wall began to look less like chaos and more like a pattern. I stopped thinking like a daughter. I started thinking like someone who needed answers and was tired of asking permission to find them. The cold crept in through the window panes that morning, early December, biting at my fingers even inside my apartment. I put on the same coat I used to wear when I visited Dad in the garage, the one that still smelled faintly of oil and pine cleaner, and drove to the edge of town where that old building sat, half forgotten. The garage hadn't changed much, still dusty, still stubborn. The lock on the door stuck for a second, then gave way with a metallic groan, like it resented being disturbed. Inside, the scent hit me first. Gasoline, dust, time. I walked slowly, my boots echoing on the concrete. The workbench stood like it always had, solid, stained, covered in old tools and scratches. I reached down and ran my fingers over the wood, stopping when I found it. JM plus EF, carved shallow into the edge. I must have been 7. Dad let me help him fix the lawnmower that day. I carved it without asking. He never yelled. I knelt down and slid open the drawer underneath, the one with the hidden latch he once showed me how to use in case we ever need to keep something extra safe. A cassette, just one, labeled in Dad's handwriting. If you're hearing this, it means I didn't finish what I started. My breath caught. My hand trembled just slightly as I picked it up and walked to the old radio in the corner. Still there, still covered in grime, but plugged in. I slid the tape in, hit play. At first, static, then his voice. "We've got a problem," he said, tired but firm. "They're using the company to launder federal contract money, shell corporations, fake invoices, all of it tied to Arcturus Energy Solutions." I froze. That was Derek's company, the one he'd been climbing through for years, the one that paid for his house, his car, the vacation photos Candace posted like clockwork. I've done everything I can to stop it. The car's the last piece. If anything happens to me, keep it safe. It holds more than memories. The tape clicked, then kept going. His voice grew weaker. "If my kids ever wonder why I kept secrets, tell them it was never about shame. It was about survival." I rewound it, played it again. I'd spent most of my life thinking Dad died with too many things unsaid. Turns out, he just said them to a tape. The truth sank in slow, like water soaking through the floorboards. Derek didn't just sell the Mustang, he sold the last piece of evidence that could take down his own employer, maybe his own career, maybe more. I stood there for a long time, not crying, not shaking, just thinking. All my life, I thought silence meant weakness, that it meant swallowing pain so others didn't have to see it. But maybe silence was something else. Maybe it was armor. Maybe it was how people survive long enough to strike back. I took the tape, tucked it into the inner pocket of my coat, and looked around the garage one last time. Then I drove, not fast, not reckless, just steady. Back at my apartment, I parked where I always did, under the flickering street lamp. But this time, when I caught my reflection in the driver's side window, I didn't see someone lost in her family's mess. I saw a woman who wasn't asking to be believed anymore. I saw someone dangerous. "He thought he buried me under family loyalty," I murmured. "He forgot I know how to dig." I went inside, took the rest of the file from my drawer, and laid it flat under the scanner. I sent every page to Agent Harrow's secure email, blacking out nothing. Everything Dad knew, everything I had, I gave them. Except the tape that I kept. I wrote just one line in the body of the email. "If you want the truth, follow the money and my brother." I hit send, and just like that, a line was crossed. My phone buzzed before I could walk away. Another unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me this one wasn't like the others. I pressed it to my ear. "You have no idea what your brother's capable of," the voice whispered. Not threatening, not angry, warning. The voice wasn't threatening. It was warning me. I played the message again and again, listening for anything I missed. An accent, a breath, something human behind the distortion. There was none. Just that last line, quiet and flat. He's already made another deal. I didn't need a name. I already knew. The next morning, I didn't leave my apartment. I didn't shower. I barely ate. I stayed near the window, waiting, watching. And right around 6 p.m., the elevator dinged. Derek. He didn't knock. He just stood in the open doorway, wearing a tailored coat like he was heading to a board meeting, not barging into his sister's apartment. "You've been talking to people," he said without preamble. "No hello, no how are you?" I stepped aside without inviting him in, but he walked through anyway. "You mean the feds?" I said, flat. "Yeah, they tend to talk to people after you sell government property." His eyes narrowed. "Don't be clever. You think you're the only one who lost something when Dad died? You're digging into things you don't understand." "No," I said. "I'm digging into things you hoped no one ever would." He turned to me, his face a controlled mask. "You're ruining everything, Alara. You think you're the victim in this story? You've always been the liability. Dad was always covering for you. Mom babied you. And me? I spent my life cleaning up your messes." The words hit like old bruises being pressed. Not new pain, just familiar. "You don't even know what that car was," he continued, pacing now. "You just like playing the martyr." I kept my voice even. "You're right. I didn't know, but I do now." Under the table, my phone was recording. No clicks, no blips, just quiet capture. "So, tell me, Derek, why'd you sell it if it was just an old car?" He hesitated, then gave a half laugh, the kind that comes when someone realizes they're caught, but still trying to look innocent. "Because I knew it wasn't just a car. It was leverage, and now it's gone." There it was. "Leverage over who?" I asked, voice still calm. His mouth opened, then closed. He shook his head, like answering would cost him something more than pride. He didn't speak again. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at nothing, the hum of the fridge louder than it should have been. Then I emailed the audio file to Agent Harrow with one line in the subject, "Confession, private." I uploaded a backup to my cloud drive and wiped it from the device. Every precaution mattered now. My mind didn't stop turning. If Derek was still making deals, someone was protecting him. Someone bigger than him, maybe bigger than all of us. I went back to my dad's tape, the one I hadn't finished. I skipped to the very end. His voice was thinner now, raspy. "If they come for the car, they're not after the metal," he said. "They're after what's hidden inside. It." I sat upright. Inside the car? It wasn't just a symbol. It wasn't just leverage. It was literal. Something was in it. Something physical. Documents, maybe a hard drive. Something he couldn't destroy but had to hide. I texted Agent Harrow immediately. "If the Mustang hasn't been stripped, I need to see it." He replied in minutes. "It's in impound in Phoenix. I'll make the call." That was all I needed. By 8:30 p.m., I was on the road heading south. The night was sharp and dry, the kind of air that made your lungs sting. My tires hummed against the pavement, while the silence inside the car stretched out like a thread about to snap. As the miles passed, I caught my reflection in the side window, not the face of a scared woman anymore. Something had shifted. There was resolve there now, even anger. But it wasn't reckless. It was focused. "I thought I was fighting my brother," I murmured. "Turns out I'm fighting the machine that built him." I stopped at a rest area near Sedona just past midnight. Desert wind kicked up red dust around the lot. I grabbed a bottle of water from the vending machine, used the restroom, and was heading back to the car when my phone buzzed. It was Derek. I didn't answer, But I opened the message. You shouldn't have recorded me. Attached was a photo, my apartment door, taken minutes ago, same welcome mat, same potted cactus, same weak hallway light flickering above. I stared at it for a long time. Then I put my phone in airplane mode, sat in the driver's seat, and locked the doors. He wasn't just scared of being exposed anymore. He was scared I was about to finish what Dad started. By the time I pulled into Phoenix, the sky was still a deep indigo, that quiet, uncertain space before sunrise. The city hadn't woken yet, but I was already wide awake, running on memory and momentum. The impound lot sat on the edge of a government building, silent behind a tall chain-link fence. Agent Harrow waited just inside, flashlight in hand, breath rising in clouds around him. "You sure you want to see this?" he asked. I didn't hesitate. "I have to." He led me down the gravel path between rows of forgotten cars, bent fenders, smashed windshields. The smell of oil and rust hung heavy in the air. But then, there it was, covered by a faded tarp, still as proud and quiet as I remembered. Dad's Mustang. I walked up to it slowly, like approaching an altar, pulled the tarp back. Even under dust and silence, it was beautiful. I traced my hand along the edge of the hood. "His fingerprints might still be here," I whispered. Maybe they were. Maybe that's all we ever really leave behind. I opened the trunk. Nothing. Just the hollow, clean space. But then I noticed it. The seam behind the rear seat panel. Barely visible. I pressed it gently. It clicked. Behind it, wrapped in oilcloth, lay 3 things. A small USB drive, a sealed envelope, and a Polaroid. Me, 10 years old, grinning in the passenger seat, while Dad held up a greasy wrench, smiling like nothing in the world was wrong. I sat down on the edge of the Mustang and opened the envelope. "Alara, if you ever find this, it means they didn't stop looking. Keep your head down, but never your heart. I was trying to protect you, not lie to you." My throat tightened. The paper trembled in my hands. All those years I thought he was hiding because of shame. But this wasn't shame. It was love disguised as distance. I didn't have time to cry. Not really. Just one tear, hot, fast, and gone. Then headlights broke the quiet. Harrow turned, frowning. "We're not supposed to have visitors." 3 figures stepped through the gate. Derek. And behind him, 2 men in Arcturus energy jackets. One had a clipboard, the other had a crowbar. Derek didn't even look at the car. He looked straight at me. "Step away," he said, voice low. "That's not yours." I stood up. "It's Dad's. That makes it mine." "You don't know what you're holding," he snapped. "That drive. It could destroy lives, people's jobs, mine." "Then it's probably worth keeping," I said evenly. He stepped closer, voice rising. "You always think you're so righteous, like you're the only one who loved him. But I'm the one who stayed. I'm the one who took care of Mom. You ran." I didn't blink. "And you sold the last piece of him we had." He grabbed my wrist. It wasn't hard, but it was enough. I didn't flinch. "You don't get to touch what's left of him," I said, eyes locked on his. Behind us, Harrow moved fast, one hand resting on his side holster. "Mr. Finch," he said sharply, "you're trespassing on federal property. Step away." The words landed harder than a gunshot. Derek's mouth opened, closed. His jaw twitched, and for a second I saw it. The unraveling. He stepped back. As agents in dark jackets came through the gate, one of the men in Arcturus uniform turned to run. The other just looked at Derek, waiting for instruction. But there was none. "I was just trying to save us," Derek muttered, voice cracking. "No," I said quietly. "You were saving yourself. That's not the same thing." He didn't look at me again. They cuffed him at the edge of the lot, right where the first light of day started bleeding through the fence. For the first time, I didn't feel small in his shadow. I didn't feel like the messy little sister, the one with all the questions and none of the answers. I just felt finished, at least with him. Harrow looked at the USB drive in my hand. "We'll need to decrypt it," he said gently, "at the bureau." I looked down at it, a tiny piece of plastic and metal, but it felt heavier than any truth I'd ever held. "Not yet," I said. "I want to know what he died for, before anyone else gets to decide what it means." I slipped it into my jacket pocket. I didn't need anyone else to explain it to me. The Mustang stayed behind, silent and still. I left the impound lot without looking back. As I walked through the parking deck downtown to my car, my phone buzzed. Blocked number. One message. He wasn't the only one who made a deal. I stared at the screen, heart steady now. Because fear wasn't what I carried anymore. Truth was... I pulled into the alley behind my apartment, just as the morning sun broke through the haze above Phoenix. The light wasn't warm. It was too sharp, like a scalpel peeling back the layers of a city that no longer knew how to be quiet. I sat in my car for a moment, phone still glowing in my hand. The message was still there. He wasn't the only one who made a deal. I stared at the words like they might rearrange themselves, give me something softer to hold on to. But they didn't. They never did. Inside, I made coffee. I wouldn't drink and sat at the kitchen table without touching the chair back. Like even that small act of settling in felt too permanent. The city hummed just beyond the window. Traffic, sirens, someone's dog, barking like the world was still spinning. But mine had stopped again. The knock on the door came at 9:03 a.m. Sharp. Harrow. Same gray suit. Same tired eyes. "We decrypted the drive," he said, not bothering with small talk. He didn't come in. We left together. The FBI field office smelled like copier toner and cold air conditioning. Harrow led me through a long corridor and into a small windowless room. A monitor was already on, a USB drive connected. He hit play. And there it was. Dad's voice, recorded years ago, but alive in that room like he'd never left. "They're moving money through Arcturus contracts with federal oversight. I sent the documentation to Agent Crane. If anything happens, he'll know what to do." I leaned forward. "Crane?" Harrow didn't look at me. The next recording played. "If this goes dark, if you're hearing this, it means Crane buried it. I don't know who else I can trust." I turned to Harrow. "Your mentor." He finally met my eyes. "It was a long time ago." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Because silence says more than any defense ever could. Later, in the parking garage below the field office, he followed me to my car. I was unlocking the door when he said, "Your father's death wasn't an accident." I froze. "But Crane's gone now. There's no upside in digging him up." My hand gripped the car door, knuckles white. "So justice has a shelf life?" He didn't answer right away. "Your brother wasn't the only one protecting something." And there it was. He hadn't helped me out of guilt. He helped because he needed to contain what might come next. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I got in the car, shut the door, and left. Back in my apartment, I sat for a long time, staring at nothing. The quiet wasn't peaceful. It was jagged, a weight pressing against my ribs. Dad's voice echoed in my head again. "If it goes dark after this..." It had. I pulled out my laptop, opened 3 secure archives, uploaded every file from the USB drive, copies saved under aliases I'd created the night I first got the warning text. One of them labeled, "For public release if I go missing." Then I opened a new message. Harrow's number. I typed, "You had a chance to be the man my father believed you could be. You chose the other side," and hit send. Then I blocked his number. I didn't need him to respond. By late afternoon, I was driving again, headed nowhere in particular. The sun dipped low behind the buildings, washing the streets in gold and amber. I parked near a small park at the edge of town. The lights had just flickered on. I pulled the envelope from my bag. Dad's letter. "You can't build peace out of silence. You have to make noise." I whispered it aloud, reading the words one last time like a promise. "I'm done being quiet." I opened my inbox, found the file, Derek's confession, the one where he said, "It was leverage, and now it's gone." I sent it to a reporter I knew would care. One of the few who still took risks. Subject line, "You'll want this." I hit send and waited. Minutes later, I parked in front of my building. That's when I saw it. A black SUV, windows tinted too dark for legal comfort. It slowed outside my apartment. The engine idled. Then it moved on. My phone buzzed. "It's done." I didn't know who sent it, but I knew what it meant. It didn't matter who sent the text. The point wasn't them. It was me. That moment, that message, was a line in the sand I'd already crossed. The fallout wasn't coming. It had arrived. 1 week later, the headlines were everywhere. Whistleblower's daughter exposes federal corruption. Arcturus Energy under federal investigation following shocking evidence dump. Family loyalty or national betrayal. Derek's name trended for days. Photos of him in cuffs, head down, the same smug expression, now replaced with something between shame and disbelief. Denied bail. No more polished interviews or charity banquets. The public turned on him fast. The same people who once called him a golden boy now labeled him a liar, a traitor. I watched it all unfold from my apartment window. No cheering, no sense of vindication, just a quiet kind of stillness. My coffee had gone cold in my hands. I used to think justice would feel lighter. It didn't. There was no joy in proving the truth, only a kind of quiet relief, like holding your breath underwater for too long and finally coming up, but still coughing. The knock came mid-morning. 2 agents in crisp black suits. Not Harrow. These were new, clean slates, or so they wanted me to believe. They asked if I was Alara Finch. I said yes. "We wanted to thank you for your courage." Courage. Funny word, really. Courage feels heroic in books. In real life, it feels like you're losing pieces of yourself one at a time. They handed me a folder, final statements to sign, confirming the chain of custody. My name at the bottom, steady, clear. After they left, I stood in the hallway and stared at the closed door for a long time. I didn't destroy them, I thought. I just stopped pretending they weren't already broken. That night, I drove back to Flagstaff. The city gave way to silence, and the silence was easier now, like a companion instead of a weight. I took the long route, past the high school, the old movie theater, the gas station that still had a payphone bolted to the wall. Dad's garage sat where it always had. Chipped paint, sagging roof, empty but still standing. I let myself in with the old key, the one he'd kept hidden behind the loose brick on the porch. The smell was different now, less grease, more air. I walked slow, fingertips grazing the old workbench, the familiar grooves and dents of 1,000 unfinished projects. "You did it your way, Dad," I whispered. "I finished it mine." I pulled the Polaroid from my coat pocket again. The edges were soft now, worn. Me in the passenger seat, age 10. Him in the driver's seat, smiling like he had all the time in the world. Keep your head down, but never your heart. It echoed through me again, the way only a father's words can. A guide, even in absence. The next morning, I walked alone through the snow-dusted cemetery. The wind cut sharp across my cheeks, but I didn't flinch. I found his headstone, wiped the frost away with my sleeve. The stone was simple, just his name, birth and death, and the words, "He kept it running." I knelt. "They know the truth now," I said quietly. You were right. Silence was never safety. I reached into my coat and pulled out the empty USB drive. It had done its job. I placed it under a small flat stone at the base of the marker, pressing it down into the cold earth. "It's over," I whispered. Then, more to myself than anyone, or at least, my part is. As I stood and turned back toward the path, something caught my eye. A low rumble. A blue 1969 Mustang, fresh paint, gleaming chrome, glided down the road below the hill. It wasn't ours. The plates were different. The driver was a stranger, but for a moment it looked like history had taken one last lap before heading somewhere new. I smiled, just faintly. Maybe some stories don't die, they just change hands. I walked slowly back toward my car, the sun rising over the mountains, casting long beams of gold across the snow. There was still weight in the world, but it wasn't pressing down on me anymore. I used to think silence made me invisible. Now I know it made me dangerous. I reached the car, opened the door, and paused one last time. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet one at the table. I was the echo that never stopped.